Welcome back. You're listening to the Voice of Russia in London. I'm Polina Boiko, and today we're talking about women in business. Last week, European Justice Commissioner Viviane Reding said that countries' voluntary action to boost women's representation on decision-making boards has largely failed and that quotas might be the solution. Plenty of research suggests that companies with more women in senior positions do better than those without. So today we're asking whether quotas are inevitable and are they right? Would quotas undermine the position of women in the workforce, giving some people the opportunity to say that a woman didn't strictly earn her way to the top, but was there because of positive discrimination? To discuss this topic, I'm joined in the studio by Jane Barnes, founder of the Yakkety-Yak multimedia company, Ben Davidson, founder and MD of Achieve Recruitment, and David O'Hara, founder of investment company Blackthorn Focus. Thank you very much for joining me today. Has a culture change taken place in relation to women at work, or are quotas a good idea? Jane, I wanted to ask for your take on the situation, first of all.
I think that women actually would not, in the main, go for quotas. I certainly wouldn't. I think, and always have thought, that it's the best person for the job and the most qualified.
Ben, in your experience in recruitment, do you think quotas would be a way forward in the UK?
I think it's a debate that certainly has to be had. It's obviously worked in Norway, if we are defining having worked as there being more women on the board, which presumably we are. So I think it needs to be discussed. I think Anne Widdecombe said that she would be absolutely infuriated if she was offered a job based on a quota, and I can understand Jane's point that a lot of women would feel that. But we are fighting against cultural norms here. If we want more women on the board, we're fighting against entrenched interests, and that's difficult to change unless you make a legislative change, and one of those within public organisations being therefore sort of almost forced to increase their numbers, I think is possibly a good one, but it's quite a wide debate.
What about the corporate ladder in general? Is it friendly to women?
I think things have changed a lot over the last few years, and I think things are more open, and there's now clearly a taboo about preventing women climb the ladder based on their gender. And I think, there is a general wider recognition of the value that diversity on the board or in senior positions can bring.
Well, Lord Davis did say that some men in charge of Britain's biggest companies are prehistoric monsters that just don't get equality. David, I'd like to ask you your opinion.
Men are more successful than women. Men are bigger failures than women. So we have much more men at the top in politics and in the corporate world. We have much more men at the bottom. I've got some statistics here. 86% of rough sleepers in London are men. The suicide rate amongst men is over 3 times the rate it is amongst women. The prison population, there's over 20 times as men in prison in the UK as there are women. So I know it sounds inflammatory, but men are bigger winners and men are bigger losers. We shouldn't just concentrate on the inequality at the top. We can't ignore the inequality at the bottom as well. Or we can leave things as they are and let the market find its way. So let women rise to the top when they can demonstrate they will bring in more business to a company, when they can demonstrate they can bring in more profit, and let men go to prison when they nick cars and rob houses.
So quotas, you think, are a bad idea?
I think Lord Davis is right that it is inevitable, because that is, I think, the new business environment we are in now. For a start, we have the environment where the executive class in the UK is being demonised, being blamed for everything, is being hated for being well paid. And put that together with the opportunity to have another pop at men and demonise men. Men and women receive abuse on a similar rate for different reasons. And this is listen, when someone talks about there being a problem with the white atmosphere in a boardroom, that's offensive. That is obviously sexist. If a board was being run by black men, black people of either gender, white people of either gender, people wouldn't complain about a white atmosphere or black atmosphere. This is overt and obvious sexism. And I thought it was illegal. So where's Lord Davies coming from here?
Do you have a response to this, Jane?
Absolutely. I've formerly been and still am a government policy advisor, and I know Lord Davies personally. I was actually in 2010. I was the Women's Enterprise Champion for the East of England region. That enables me via companies like Enterprising Women, YTKO, Modern Muse, of which I'm one of the 100 foundings, if you like. But that enables me to go out and actually recruit women from very diverse areas in the UK as well. Some of the nationally recognised deprived areas. Some of what you've said, I quite agree, the figures are horrendous. But that doesn't mean that I also agree. I think women and men can be equally successful. I've got colleagues who do 25% year-on-year growth rate in a business when everybody else is sinking. So they work darned hard for that. And I think I'm very passionate about the fact that more women will help the economy. All women, and a lot of women run a lot of businesses from home, but they do that really well. They work that around their own commitments, and unfortunately, although it's getting better, men are coming forward now to actually say, hey, remember me, I'm your dad, rather than just allowing the woman, if you like, to allow that. So they go off to work. The woman now works because the economy demands it. Not many people I know manage to have a lot of loose change at the end of the day once they've worked very hard. Childcare, everybody knows, has gone through the roof. Let's see more support for that and get more women. There's over 1 million women who've come from the sector in the last year. I've watched multimedia companies go across the East of England region, well over 2,000 that I know of, all have stopped trading. That's sacrilegious, really. And the East of England, England itself, has got some of the best people here. We have really creative people. We have really creative ideas, and that's what needs to be nurtured. And I think women on the board, it gives a blend. You should have, and what about disabled people? You were talking earlier about how long it's going to take. I say rubbish. We need to act now, but I don't believe that quotas is the way to go. With the equality issue, this isn't about equality. This is about common sense. This is about embracing change, embracing people in the boardroom who are diverse, who bring other attributes to that. That's what the board is paying for in certain cases, or that's the expertise they want on board if they're non-profits.
Just to remind you, you're listening to the Voice of Russia in London, and today we're talking about women in business. To discuss this, I'm joined by Jane Barnes, founder of the Yakkety-Yak multimedia company, Ben Davidson, founder and MD of Achieve Recruitment, and David O'Hara, founder of investment company Blackthorn Focus.
Men may be the biggest risk takers, but we're catching up too. I come from a pretty diverse working background. I was the first female to be qualified in offshore health and safety and scaffolding. Shell recognise that. And I got told when I got my first contract with them that I knew more than the board did about their company. And this is where women's strength is going to lie, I think, is finding out what you're going to be doing. Do it to the best of your ability and deliver it well. And those three ethics need to go forward with all boards, whoever's on them. And maybe the fact that we're going to be in there, get some disabled people in there too, because they come from a different perspective too. And things need to change. They need to change now. We don't have the time as an economy to faff around and not make those key decisions.
With all due respect, Jane, it's a lot of well-intentioned sort of woolly waffle, if you'll forgive me. Of course, these are all correct things. Women do have a lot to offer. I think everybody accepts that. And your statistics earlier there, David, I'm sure are correct. Men are probably bigger risk takers, so you're battling against that. There are entrenched interests within industry. We've talked about that, but nobody really is saying, what do we do then? You're talking about women having all these great qualities and people that personally, anecdotal evidence of people that can succeed, all very good and well, but that doesn't alter the fact that there is still a massive amount of inequality. So what do you do? If you don't have quotas, what do you do? That's my question.
I think that, and particularly because of what you do, you recruit. You need to find people, and the boards need to come. I think there's 76% of board positions go to people, never get advertised. Legislation could be changed so that everybody can apply, and the best candidates then can go forward.
Legislation exists. The jobs need to be advertised internally and externally, particularly at senior level and particularly in public and corporate organisations. That's
not law, with the greatest respect. 76% of really key jobs get done through what they call the old boys club, or, and that's fine. But if we change legislation and make it law that all these positions at a very top level have to be advertised, then, sorry, but woolly waffle you called what I said. But that woolly waffle balances not only running a business, but keeping the home together, making sure your meals are on the table in the evening, and looking after children, making sure they have the education and the wherewithal to move forward in other things and embrace the fact there's so much change.
David.
Ben, I'm glad you like my statistics. I'll give you another one. I looked at companies in the FTSE 100. It was around 6 months ago. I looked at companies that had been founded less than 50 years ago. So a really successful company that within 50 years has got itself into the FTSE 100. I was able to identify 50 founders of those companies. How many do you think were women? The answer is none. There is not a single woman that has started a new, highly successful company in the UK. So if they're not starting these companies that go on to do exceptionally well, why should they be on the boards of them?
Excuse me, I could quote you a few examples. Michelle Moan is one of them, and recently she's the one with the underwear and the wonderful company, An Ethic. And she's done very well and got an award from the Queen for her endeavours. There are a lot of women who head some really key companies and show that there are a lot of things and a lot of changes taking place. And that's nothing to do with having a pop at men. And I mean, women's great inventions. You talk about, women, can't do things. Where would you be without your windscreen wipers, and this sort of thing? Life rafts, fire escapes, all invented by women. Okay, I've got a list here if you'd like them. But car heaters, okay, that was in 1871. A life raft, 1880. Marie Beasley.
I'm sure you can list many things. I'm sure if we put together,
I have God on our side, Ben. Maybe he invented a few things as well in his time.
But my point is, something presumably needs to be done. But where does equality lie? Are we asking for 50% of women on boards? That to me would be ridiculous, because there's an elephant in the room. And that is that most women, and I'm generalising, I agree, I admit, most women don't follow a strong commercial career. They have other priorities, some of which you've just listed previously. And I don't think there should be anything wrong with that. If we're looking to get 50% of women on the board of the major companies, perhaps we should look at making sure men take up 50% of the household duties at home too. And if there should be a quota about that, then it would be fair. But at least we ought to accept as a society that a lot of women don't want a strong commercial career. So therefore, what number are we looking for? Are we looking for 30%? Are we looking for 40%? It's not being defined. So where are we targeting?
There's another taboo here. I believe it is taboo in UK society for a woman to earn more than a man. I think that goes some way to explaining why we have this expectation that men will dedicate themselves to a full career and progress through that career, and while women will look after the kids.
Just to remind you, you're listening to the Voice of Russia in London, and today we're talking about women in business. Ben, in your experience, are women still earning less for doing the same as men?
Yeah, I think that's really very clear across all statistics. And I work with a lot of small businesses. I recruit for a lot of small businesses, and I know there is a massive amount of fear out there about the maternity legislation and an unwillingness to take on young women who may well be having children soon because of a fear. And I think it's probably unfounded. I think if there was more understanding of what the actual costs were, there'd be less of this fear. But I can tell you, in the past, and not too distant past, I've been asked to recruit for people that will not be having babies in the near future, and our commercial kind of drive means that we have to sort of have to think about that. Do we work with that company once they've said that or not? And it's common.
I've heard something similar from a recruiter.
Our answer is, of course, we cannot work that way. We have to give everybody a fair chance, and the best person shall get the job. And we will make sure that we put forward a broad cross-section of individuals to the client to make their decision. But of course, the client will still make their decision. So it doesn't matter really what we do.
The gender wage gap. Do you see it as a problem, Jane?
Absolutely. I'm a great believer, as I say, in equal pay for equal work. There's still an awful lot of bias around women not being given that same accolade. And it almost seems to be a what can we get away with rather than this is the salary and you negotiate. I've tended to negotiate up for my salaries in the past. And I did pave the way for other women to move forward with things, and that enabled that to happen. Because you do bring certain things to the pot. That's how it's going to make a difference. I think there are quite a few women. Bev Hurley, for instance, who's the CEO of YTKO, Enterprising Women. She started that with a few women on board. It's now at 8,000 and rising, and I believe they're going into Europe and probably the rest of the world at some point. There are lots of still successful women around, and I think women recognise that they need to do that. But I come back to the banks who also used to charge female entrepreneurs 1% over base rate for any loans or overdrafts, which when I said at first everyone went, oh, rubbish, but obviously it's been proved since then. And you have to know your marketplace, you have to keep an eye on things.
David?
One of the things that comes through time and again is just how much better investors women are than men. So
because they don't take as many risks?
I think that's maybe men tend to think, oh, I know what I'm on about, when perhaps they don't. And they will blunder forwards with confidence. Well,
whereas women do their research much more. That is what people suggest is the reason. My beef is that people in the UK who are invested in their pension funds would like them to be run as for the maximum return possible. However, the number of female pension fund managers and the number of women working in investment management, senior investment management roles in the city is similar to what you'll find on the board of a large multinational company in the UK. So there are a few places where we desperately need more women working in these very important roles. But are they not coming through, or are they not being allowed? Ben, do you see a massive disparity between how many women and men apply for the same quite senior positions?
Not really. And I do a lot of work within sort of the sales discipline and recruiting for sort of senior sales, director and sales management roles. And women are well represented. I don't have the statistics here, unfortunately, but I'm sure they would show a good representation. And, women communicate well. They communicate more articulately than men most of the time. That's been found. And sales is about communication. So in that sector, certainly. I think in maybe other sectors, they'll be less represented. Yeah, I don't think there's a problem with applications, so to speak. We often say in recruitment, people recruit in their own image, which is a sort of proven truth, certainly in my experience, of people will recruit for what they like, even if it's an accounts role and they're an entrepreneur. It doesn't necessarily work. You don't want an entrepreneurial accounts guy generally, but or girl, excuse me. So of course, if you've got a lot of men at the senior level and they're recruiting in their own image, you're going to get a lot of men working in those senior positions and taking on.
David?
Jane, I'm glad you know Lord Davis. Maybe you'd raise this issue with him when you next see him. Why should the private sector accept these quotas being foisted upon them by legislators when such quotas don't exist? For example, in the cabinet, there's no quota of women that must be in the cabinet of the British government. There was no quota of women that must be on the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of England, which sets interest rates, one of the most important groups of people in the UK. Hasn't had a woman on there in nearly 2 years out of 12 people. So why should we have it in the private sector?
That's very key points. I would just say this, though. Government have been recruiting women at all levels through government because of the shortage of women that are in there. There are lots of men in very key places who want this to happen, who embrace the change, and I think companies need to do that. We like to, as you guys do, we want to be considered on our merits. We work really hard, we learn our trade, we do the best we can do.
Jane, you mentioned childcare.
Yes.
This seems like a very big issue for women. You said, Ben, that women go off and have babies and employers are scared of that. Have there been any studies conducted on how detrimental it is to a company for a woman to go off for 6 months, have a baby and come back?
There have been countless, and it depends who does them, of course, that tends to define the result, really. If it's a sort of, a feminist organisation that would do that, it will come up with an answer that is that says that there's very little cost. And if it's sort of a British Chamber of Commerce, for instance, then they might come up with something else. I think there's a general misunderstanding within particularly small businesses and sort of relatively new businesses, quite obviously, and a misunderstanding of that maternity legislation and a fear of it consequently. So.
Does a woman basically have to put her child into morning till evening childcare in order to be able to climb the traditional corporate ladder in the UK nowadays? Probably
would be my feeling that if you're not there a lot of the time, for half the day, if you're working part-time for a period of a year or 2 years or whatever you need to do, I think you're going to put yourself, maybe not because of discrimination, so to speak, but you're just not going to be there when big key decisions are made, and your voice is not going to be heard. So, of course, you're going to be overlooked for the senior positions. If you've got full-time childcare and you're there all the time, you're going to be in a bit more of a chance of climbing the ladder, and that's a simple fact of the matter, I'd say.
I would totally disagree with that. Companies, boards need to understand flexible working hours. They're designed so that you've got key people, and key people includes everybody and embraces everybody. Most childcare, you can drop your child in the morning, they're given breakfast, they're in a usually 100% environment where they're looked after and nurtured. You do not have that on your mind when you walk through into the workplace. When women get pregnant, she can train another person who also, either another woman, another man, for that role, who will update her. I think that flexi hours and flexi working from home has got to be the next thing, and also that's good for the environment because you're not spending all that or using all that petrol and spending all your money on very high costs there. But I do feel that there are certainly things in place now, and a lot more boards, a lot more major companies need to embrace flexible working, to embrace everybody. Men sometimes will have an accident in their car or off their motorbike. They're in hospital for a while. Everybody embraces that because, he's going to come back. But they look on sort of childbearing as though it's, put up a cross and that should never happen. And I think that also needs to be embraced. There is the process there for keeping key people on board. And I think it's so easy to let people drop off any ladder, particularly women. Because of that, we can bring diversity and change. Although it's very new, there are 2 males now in relationships who can adopt children. So they are given the same rights. Are you then going to discriminate, with your key board member who happens to have been on the board for 5 years when they say, well, actually, I'm taking the break to, get to know my new son or daughter or whoever? You've got to look at everything. Everything is changing rapidly. We need to keep up with it. If it means mentoring all the boards across the UK, let's do it. But on the back of that, let's also train up women. So when these boards do have them in front of them and they're pitching, and that's what we all do, we pitch for business, we pitch for everything in life. So when that happens, they're there, they're poised, they're ready to move forward. That's what this economy should be doing, is moving people forward.
I'd love to hear final thoughts, Sir Mervyn.
Sure. Well, there's a passionate defence of women at senior level there from Jane. I think, the only problem with it is that none of us, I certainly haven't disagreed with any of those points. I didn't think we were coming here to debate whether women are of value in higher levels. I thought the debate was on how to ensure that they get there, and that's why I was discussing what I see as the barriers to them climbing the ladder. The actual reality on the ground. Can we really mentor every board in the country and every business? Because maybe that's, if you're not going to employ quotas, maybe that education is the only way. How quickly will that work?
Do you think it's a question of generations and seeing a shift over time and dinosaurs on the boards dying out? I think things are going in the right direction. I think, if you're not going to employ quotas and if that reaches real sort of, people really don't want to do that, then fair enough. We just need to take time and we keep educating and we keep working at it. David, final thoughts?
The discussion of quotas is horrifying. It is the job of shareholders, people who own these companies, to decide who goes on the board of them. And it is the responsibility of boards to always select the best person for the job. We'll lose that if quotas come in.
Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today. Thank you to all my guests in this discussion. I was joined by Jane Barnes, founder of the Yakkety-Yak multimedia company, Ben Davidson, founder and MD of Achieve Recruitment, and David O'Hara, founder of investment company Blackthorn Focus. Stay with us. You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London.